all I can remember in my own mind was yes with an exclamation point, and and I think at one point I said praise God to myself.
Something happened in that last week, the week before the shooting.
And then he calls my family pawns in his game. Well, he taught me how to play chess.
Guilty.
That is the now Chief Deputy Tobe Leazenby reliving what it was like inside of that courtroom, November 11th, 2024, when Richard Allen was found guilty of killing Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Welcome to Headline Prime. I'm Susan Hendricks, and our headliner today is Tobe Leazenby. He was the Carroll County Sheriff at the time during this investigation when Abby and Libby were murdered, February 13th, 2017. And he opens up. He talks about what it was like not being able to talk to the media during that 5+ years of the investigation. Also, his lowest point in 2022, and brings us back to that 2019, now infamous press conference when the Superintendent Doug Carter said,
directly to the killer who may be in this room.
no matter what preconceived notions you may have about this case, one thing will be clear. Tobe Leazenby's heart was in the right place. He gave everything to this investigation. The day that they announced that someone was in custody and the speech that he gave, it came from the heart.
I believe in a God of justice and righteousness. Today, I believe that same God has provided us with justice for Abby and Libby.
How that got him through the years that followed, and how it changed him now as a person. Tobe, it's so good to see you. It's been so long since I remember first being in your office.
There's something to it that going back out there that you kind of look around and you go, what am I missing here? What else can we develop from what we see out here?
You clearly were connected emotionally to this case, and of course, on the case as the sheriff. Were there times as the investigation went on, and we're talking more than 5 years, that you had your doubts that you'd ever get the person that did this?
Yes, Susan. There were, and I think that enters into any investigator's mind in any investigation, and there were days, yes.
Yeah, and I remember throughout the investigation and meeting you, and you were so kind right away. And I know what you went through, because you would say, you were so nice. You took my call, and you're probably thinking, why did I give her my number? But you would always take my call, and it wasn't just me, it was various media outlets. But we wanted something as a whole, media outlets, to say, like, what do you know? And if someone was arrested, I remember this clearly, nearby, that kind of looked like the sketch, people would reach out to you and say, hey, any connection? You're like, we're looking into them, meaning you're looking into everybody. But then that became the headline. So was that tough, kind of mediating the media?
Yes. To this day, I consider myself not only back then as a transparent administrator, but transparent person. And I'm
You
open
were.
and honest, and always try to speak from the heart, if you will. And so there were days that, I wanted to say something, but, for the integrity of the investigation, and I think you actually heard me say that a few times, I wasn't going to comment.
Yeah, exactly. So we saw it play out about the bullet. Like, that wasn't spoken about on purpose. Like, you wanted to keep close to the investigation, and I will say, you have to hand it to you and the team for those things not leaking. Was that shocking to you now that you're able to kind of look back on it all?
We had a great group of professionals on board all along, and didn't always agree. That came up, but again, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with humans, even in the law enforcement profession, and so those things were bound to happen. So So yeah, for everyone to keep it close to the vest, so to say, was outstanding.
I remember being in your office and you said, "Who is that? Who is that? I know that voice."
Who is that? Who is that person? And so there's still that, and I know this is the way it is for all of our investigators on board, but there's that drive or that fire to get to that justice.
And then when Richard Allen was arrested, and
Mhm.
I thought, CVS, I know the guys that work at CVS. Had you been there? Did you know the voice?
Honestly, I did not, and as I explained to someone the other day, Susan, when I learned who it was and where he was employed, um, uh, I didn't see that coming. I honestly didn't.
Wow.
I was quite surprised by the information when it first came out.
Take me back to the day that you found out someone was in custody. What was that like for you?
Well, unfortunately, that was a low spot in my own personal life. I was actually at the funeral of my father who had passed in October of 2022. And ironically, the service had just ended, and then Chief Deputy / Detective Tony Liggett called me and say, as I recall it, we've got somebody in jail for the crime.
Wow.
It was a short conversation because I was with family at that time period.
What did you think? And was it almost surreal?
And that's a good word. I've used that quite a bit here lately, Susan. Particularly even after the verdict was read, it was almost as if that were surreal. But yes, to answer your question, it just, I mean, yeah, I think the word finally came
Yeah.
to mind. And there was some joy, if you will, internal joy, and just glad that we were able to come to that point.
Yeah, I interviewed the family throughout the investigative process, which was so many years.
Mhm.
And I remember Tara saying this to me, that she'd pull up next to a car, you're at a stoplight, you look over and you think, could that be it? I mean, no one trusted anyone. We talked about it. No one really trusted anyone anymore. And she even said to me, Susan, even out of state, I'd stop at a stoplight and say, could that be you? And
Mhm.
Kelsey was thinking, it could be anyone. Are you standing next to me? And I think that was the consensus of, oh my gosh. And that stood out to me
Mhm.
because even when we heard about things as time went on, because
Mhm.
in a normal investigation, and I wish people would understand this, is that people are looked at and you look at them and you say, okay, no. And it doesn't necessarily mean cleared, but it means, okay, no, there's nothing that connects that person. And then you move on to the next person. But
Right.
I think that what was clear to me, what was that no one was ever arrested, right? There were names out there and
Mhm.
no one was ever in custody. And Mike used to say to Becky, and he said to me on stage at CrimeCon, look, Susan, I've been on this roller coaster. And at first, I think it was Daniel Nations was possibly someone you guys were
Mhm.
looking into. And he said he got his hopes
Mhm.
up. And he stopped doing that because he realized, okay,
Yeah.
I need to wait and just see.
We're just beginning. We are just now beginning. And I can tell you on behalf of the sheriff and the police chief, so many other partners that have stood with us over this period of time, that we will not stop.
If you don't mind, let's go back to that now infamous presser in April 2019.
We also believe this person is from Delphi, currently or has previously lived here, visits Delphi on a regular basis, or works here. We believe this person is currently between the age range of 18 and 40, but might appear younger than his true age. Directly to the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, You never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have.
I can remember it clear as day. I had just been there, I think a couple of weeks before. And I came back and I thought, well, maybe are they going to announce someone's in custody? We didn't know. So what was that like for you? Because I remember you walking out from that gray curtain area because I was sitting on the floor. What was that day like?
That was an ongoing effort in basically trying to, I don't want to say call somebody's bluff, but to call them out publicly and say, if you're involved, come forward type statement. And I loved, Doug's comment that he made that, we feel that you're hiding in plain sight.
Yes.
And there was a lot to that statement. And as time went along, we found that to come to fruition. Doug and I had an opportunity to speak briefly before that news conference, and the emotion that man had all the way around, not whether or not it was this investigation, just all the way around. He's a former Indiana sheriff from Hamilton County, Indiana, and so we shared sheriff conversation, if you will, and so we had that connection, and so for Doug to step forward and say what he did, I mean, and I told him, I said, I don't want to say anything, but I do know I want to represent Carroll County as its sheriff, and that was my purpose in at least being on display, so to say. And I don't mean that in an arrogant tone. That's just, that's the way it is. People want to see their sheriff.
Yeah. Leadership. What was the next day like for you after that presser? Any different than the average day?
Not really. As I explained before throughout, I relied heavily on not only our county investigators, but that core team that was involved. And so the business as sheriff obviously continued throughout. And so I always, and I've always been this way, but I always try to stay focused on whatever the task is ahead of me. And so my duty was to, we had bills to pay, we had inmates to take care of, those types of things. So I tried to focus more so on the administrative aspect of it, but again, also still be in the loop and have those frequent conversations with our investigators.
Well, it's clear you did a great job of that. I remember you talking me off a ledge because it was, and not to take anything away, clearly, this is just a minuscule aspect of the rumors and the lies that were happening. But someone wrote about or asked you a question. It was an open Q&A about me being at a cookout at your house. And I texted you and said, what? I was never at your house at a cookout. And you said, don't worry. This is what I said. I said, there's no validity to that. You were just very kind of straightforward. Like, it's all right.
Yeah.
I got no push. Like, So were you able to kind of get used to it, if you will? Because you were able to say to me, it's all right. Don't worry about it.
Well, I mean, being at it for 38 years now, Susan, I mean, good or bad, I guess, an individual gets to the point where they're, and I don't want this to come across as a negative connotation, but you also become hardened and calloused, if you will. And so, it's kind of like water rolling off of the back of a duck. After a while, you just you let it roll, and the other thing is I was raised with common sense values and ethical values. And so being able to have that sense of right and wrong is still instilled into me today, starting with my upbringing and then going into the profession that I did. So I've tried to carry that through.
Me too. I have the Catholic guilt through and through to this day. And I listened to this morning, again, I've listened to it several times, but on October 31st, 2022, you stood up and you said, I believe in a God of justice and righteousness.
Today, I believe that same God has provided us with justice for Abby and Libby.
Was it tough to believe that throughout the investigation with the highs and the lows?
Um, if I could speak for a moment and from a faith and spiritual
Yeah,
standpoint,
sure.
Susan, I've always felt that um, God is with us in the darkness and in the light. And so for me to be able to put that on paper and say that day, it was a very good feeling. I earnestly thank those who prayed for this moment in time. We now move forward through the Indiana criminal justice system, allowing the system to provide its due diligence and process in providing that justice which is owed Abby and Libby, their families, and this community. If anything, I boast for God in that we have that justice and righteousness to this day, with the verdict.
Mm-hmm.
And so spiritually, that's where I draw my strength from God. And so that's what keeps me strong, has kept me strong for 38 years in this profession.
I wasn't there. I was on the set and listening to it live as it happened and listening to you. It was such an impactful speech. I'm sure you wrote it maybe several days before, the night before, but I thought it was so powerful and telling. And I think that it did help the families, that you said you believed in that and
Yeah.
justice for the families.
Yeah. And that was the two things, I think, God placed on my heart to keep it short and sweet. And as I recall, that's the way my speech was. And, two things: I wanted to thank God, and I wanted to thank the families, for their involvement and all that time and being patient with the process. And, I don't know how many times Mike, Patty, and I had a conversation about the wheels of justice turning slowly. And obviously we saw that. But, again, that justice and righteousness circled back around with us.
Did you know what was ahead of you after that day? Could you even imagine what was to come?
I mean, obviously, I know how the court system works.
Yeah.
More
More than me.
So, but to have the drama, I'll say that much, involved with not only prior to the trial and during the trial, I honestly did not anticipate so much drama with the various players involved. And so I think we all professionally handled that well that have been in the business for a while. And so we didn't know what to expect, because this was unlike anything Carroll County, Indiana's ever experienced.
Why do you think it happened? Do you think it's a shift in the media, and because so many people with YouTube and with various outlets, or the interest because of, thank goodness, what Libby captured on her cell phone? I guess it's never one thing. And the interest, I'm sure you don't mind, the interest was, there is interest. Let's find this guy. But then it shifted to me. And in court, I will say, I know I saw you every day and it was so great to see you, but in what I felt was in that courtroom, and it's hard to explain, but it felt like there's good and evil in here. There's a good side and a bad side. And I know that everyone's innocent till proven guilty. I'm not even necessarily talking about the man in custody. I'm talking about everyone around it, and the words, and how powerful words are, and how really, when you badmouth someone, and it may be easy to do behind your computer, especially when you're not showing your face,
Right.
but this is real. These are young girls, 13 and 14, and they're losing sight of that. And frankly, I don't even think they cared at the end, and it's sick.
Sure. Yeah. And I think maybe I've shared with you early on, and to this day, it's true. I do not participate in social media. I don't have a Facebook page. The only thing remotely close is obviously email, and that's somewhat old.
You're like, I do email. That's it. Right.
So I just avoid social media. I mean, I have a spouse, and adult children obviously participate in that, but I'm not bad mouthing social media all the way
No,
around
but it's
because there
you're
are,
able to stay out of the
yeah,
toxicity.
yeah, there's positive things out there, but
Absolutely.
yeah, but you really got to search for it.
But I remember seeing the bridge for the first time. It was right after I had met you. I went down there with Kelsey for the first time and
Mhm.
seeing that because I had never seen it
Mhm.
except in the video that we saw.
Sure.
And it took me a while to get down there, but it was much more isolated than I thought. I felt like I knew as soon as I was down there for the first time. Oh my gosh, this guy's got to be a local.
My hypothesis it was that either it was someone that grew up in the area and knew the area, the
Yeah.
topography of the land, those types of things, and came back for whatever
Yep.
reason, or it was someone still living in our community. And not to discredit any of the thoughts that came in from out of state or even from across the globe, but again, I think the focus stuck with someone local.
When you knew that that was part of the evidence, what was on Libby's phone, what was your thought when you first heard it or first saw it? Because the first time I saw it was recently during the trial in October, and that was jarring for me. And I
Mhm.
thought to myself, oh my gosh, good for you.
As I remember when I first laid eyes on that video, I thought this is genius.
Yeah.
This is genius on Libby's part because, and I know Jerry Holman and I talked, after the trial, and I think Nick McClellan was part of that conversation, and I distinctly remember telling Nick, I'm not real sure if we would have had a case without this video. She put a face to the crime that was just a very prominent key piece of the investigation.
I agree. I looked over when it was played that day. I thought, oh my gosh, they sound so young. And
Mm.
that seems obvious. They were young. They were 13 and 14, but to hear their voices different. And when I look back and I saw Tara crying and I saw the teacher crying, it was really hard
Sure.
to see that in court. And so
Yeah.
was that hard for you, for the investigators? I'm sure it was.
Again, I resort back to the human factor involved here, Susan, and we're human too, and I hate to bring this up, but earlier in the year, in January of 2022, we had lost two sheriff's deputies in a horrific car crash.
I remember I
So,
called you that day, I think, because
yeah,
I had been going on, I maybe
yeah,
Dr. Oz, and you said, I have to go. So, and I
right,
thought, oh my gosh, right.
yeah.
Horrible
So
accident.
so
Right.
that was the whole year. I mean, it was obviously by the end of the year, um, with a successful conclusion, at least at that stage of having an arrest, made for the year going out much better. But yeah, the emotions just kind of goes back to I'll say what you had quoted earlier with Mike in the roller coaster ride.
Mhm.
You know, um, just that those up and down time periods throughout. Just it played a toll,
Yeah.
and but again, we stood strong, and here we are today.
And when you heard guilty, what were your thoughts in that courtroom? Because I wasn't inside, I was outside at the time.
All I can remember in my own mind was yes with an exclamation point, and
Mm.
I think at one point I said praise God to myself.
And finally now, when the verdict was read and now it is justice. I know you were hoping for that. And of course, the girls are not coming back. I've been inside of Abby's house, inside of Libby's house. There's a deafening silence that I saw the girls' shoes. I saw pictures of them. It was heart wrenching. We'll never know exactly what the girls went through, but I truly believe there was bravery there. And I remember Mike saying early on, maybe one of them could have left the other one's side. What are your thoughts overall, the girls on that day?
Bravery is a good word. I mean, to me, that was true love, true friendship between the two of them. Particularly through the emotional trauma that, based on what's been described at this point through
Mhm.
the trial.
And I think, Tobe, that is true. now in hindsight, I think what you said, without that video, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of going back to the surreal word,
Mhm.
and just, it's in certain days, I feel like this was just all a dream that we
Yeah.
lived, but it was, unfortunately, it was reality. And so, but, um, we've learned, we've loved, we've been able to, uh, hold, I remember the day of the verdict,
Mhm.
sharing a hug with Becky, and just the look on her face was, it was priceless. I mean, and
Mhm.
she wasn't. I could sense a closure to a certain degree within the display on her face,
Mhm.
but there's just, you could sense the emotion, at least in the hug that we shared with one another after she walked out of the courtroom. And I was just so happy for both the girls' families.
I know, me too. Well, Tobe, thank you so much.
Thank
It,
you.
it truly is. I'm a better person knowing you, and I'm so glad that I was able to interview and how kind you were and how
Thank
what
you.
a resource you were throughout this investigation. And it's a good thing you don't have social media. Maybe I'll try it. But it's been a pleasure, Tobe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. My
Appreciate it.
pleasure as well.